This is your special edition of Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. It is a 1-year anniversary special episode. Just wanted to take some time here to play a few of my favorite moments, interviews from the first year of Daily Delivery. Say thank you to everybody who has listened in the last year. Our very first official episode was February 1st, 2021, and yes, that is exactly a year ago. Time has stood still in a certain way. When we started planning this podcast, it was actually before the pandemic even started. We kind of carried that energy into the summer and fall, fall of 2020, I should say, kind of knew that was not the perfect time to launch it. But by February, it was starting to feel like sports were on their way back, and it was maybe time to bring this thing to life. I'd done a bunch of practice ones. I'd become, terrified at the sound of my own voice. We'd done sports podcasts at the Star Tribune before, the Timberwolves podcast, the Twins podcast. We still do a Vikings podcast that is quite successful, but wanted to do a sports, general sports podcast 5 days a week. Just thought that was a good way to take advantage of a lot of the knowledge we have within the building and really kind of talk every day about the biggest stories in Minnesota sports. And, I'm happy with what we've done so far. I'm proud of a lot of the work that has gone into this. Over 260 episodes. That sounds kind of mind-boggling to me as I think back on a year of work. But, it's been you, the listener, that has made that all possible. You've kept listening more. More people have found this podcast as the year has gone on, made it worthwhile in more than just, our own enjoyment and our own sense of this being the right thing to do. So thank you so much for listening. If you like it, please listen more. Tell a friend, tell an enemy, and we'll have plenty more in store in the next year and beyond. With that said, let me play a few clips from past episodes just to kind of refresh your memory and refresh mine at some of what's already happened on Daily Delivery. And I'll set up each of these clips quickly with a little comment of my own and the date on which they originally appeared. All right, this first clip is with Vikings head coach Brad Childress, who actually was a guest on a podcast just last week. He was one of the very first guests I had on the show. This is from February 5th, 2021, talking about Brett Favre, the 2009, the 2010 seasons. Just loved the honesty and openness from Brad Childress. You and I have talked about this before for different projects, but as you if you think back on your time as a head coach with the Vikings, is there any one single thing that you say, man, if this had gone differently, 2010 might not have played out the way that it played out?
Yeah, you'd have to probably zero in on the Randy Moss thing and how I dealt with him, and not keeping the owners completely in the loop with what was transpiring, and probably emotion got the better of me at that point in time. I didn't think he was good for our football team, and as a football coach, you just want to make sure that that's a thriving environment. But I would say probably his dismissal, him going down the road, I wish I would have handled that better.
The good of that era was 2009, obviously, such a great season, and Brett Favre obviously being an integral part of that. You've talked to me before about, how important quarterback is and, kind of chasing that quarterback who maybe it's going to be kind of a multi-layered approach here, but maybe first, maybe take me through a little bit of, Favre's arrival again, but then also I'm going to use that to ask you about a couple other quarterbacks as well.
Yeah, we had kind of had a dialogue going, if you will, through the summer. He had some physical issues. He had a torn biceps I believe it was, that he needed to have taken care of before he could really physically throw a football again. And I believe he went over to Pensacola to Dr. Andrews' office and had that done, had it taken care of, had it rectified. Matter of fact, his agent, Bus Cook, sent me a video of him. He was kind of wacky. He was on some kind of pain meds and he didn't want to go under, and Dr. Andrews was going to do it under kind of a local operation. talking to him about getting that thing fixed, and then obviously recruiting him to come to Minneapolis. And there was a reason that Ted Thompson traded him to the Jets, because he didn't want him back in our division. And who would have known that the Jets were going to draft Mark Sanchez, and all of a sudden Brett Favre was going to be on the street again. So it was you probably visualize it back during that draft. Sanchez was taken, and then Favre was put on the street, I think, within a day or two. Then the dance kind of began.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Now, this interview, much different than that one. Craig Finn, lead singer, frontman, guitarist, Hold Steady. One of my favorite bands was in Lifter Puller. Before that, one of my favorite bands. It was an indulgence of mine, but he is also a big Minnesota sports fan, so I had him on an early podcast as well. This was from February 15th, 2021, talking about the creative process that he goes through. You have always been a storyteller in the songs that you write. Where does that come from specifically, or how do you come up with the material? Some of it probably drawn from experience, and some of it completely made up, I would hope.
Yeah, a lot of it's made up. I actually, Jeff Tweedy from Wilco wrote a book a while back, a couple of years ago, and it was what he said about creativity is something I found myself very much agreeing with. That you kind of have to take things in, and you kind of almost, as you get older, you get busy with whatever, you kind of have to make an appointment to take things in, and that can be literature, reading. Doesn't have to be fine literature, great literature. It can be whatever, film. TV in this day and age, which is, sort of we're in peak TV, but also just walking around. I mean, I live in New York. You can see a lot by just going outside and, seeing what happens in an hour on the sidewalks. So I think taking all that stuff in and creating your own stories. But to be honest, reading is probably the biggest one. I've always been I love reading fiction, and those stories help me think of my own stories.
That's a good point. I feel like when I find myself immersed in a good book, or I'm kind of in a phase where I'm reading a lot or listening to audiobooks, as it were, right now, because that's how I consume a lot of what I do right now. That's when I'm in a better creative space. Like, you need to take in good. You got to get that kind of creating that headspace to allow yourself to create in that way.
Yeah, it's been suggested that reading fiction is kind of a meditation, because you kind of go into another world and take on, the other characters' problems, maybe leave yours behind. And I think, to me, that's how it works. I can really go somewhere with a book that I can't even with a film or TV or whatever. With a really good book, I can go all the way there.
If you haven't noticed yet, we are taking these in chronological order. This one from March 3rd, 2021 had Twins general manager Thad Levine on the show. And I basically asked him flat out, do you have enough pitching? I was worried about it. I'm not playing this to gloat, but I think it's interesting to hear kind of the mindset of a team, especially in retrospect, knowing that the year did not go how the Twins wanted it to go. I've expressed this opinion both on this podcast and in writing, and so have some of my colleagues. Again, I'm already, it's early March. I'm already thinking about October. That's the nature of the beast. Convince me that you have enough pitching, both starting and in the bullpen, that's going to get it done in October.
We have enough pitching.
Okay, that's just
well.
Okay.
I think you're hitting on a point, which is a valid question probably each and every year, but never more so than this season. And this is the reason why. I think one of the things that we are sitting really struggling with is trying to understand, coming off of a shortened season last year, where our standard bearers from an innings pitch standpoint, Maeda and Berrios both accumulate somewhere in the mid 60s in innings pitched. In a traditional year, we would view it as particularly concerning to ask a pitcher who only accumulated 65 innings to jump up to 180 innings. Now, objectively, we do have to factor in that we had a full spring training last year. We had a secondary summer camp, and also that Wes Johnson kind of really expertly had these guys pitching on an every fifth day rotation when they were away from camp. So I don't think we view that they only threw 65 innings, but nonetheless, they certainly didn't get close to their normal season's outputs of 160 to 190 innings pitched. So I think like almost every front office, we walked into this offseason thinking, if in doubt, add more pitching, because you just never know where you're going to need it. Hence the additions of guys like Matt Shoemaker and Jay Happ. I think we're really bullish on our starting rotation as it currently sits for opening day. What we're also equally excited about is the guys that we may have starting at AA and AAA. We think we've got the next lines of defense lined up well. Now, one thing that we're having active dialogue about, and it will ultimately be up to Rocco and Wes Johnson to determine this, is this a type of season that you're a little bit more open-minded to going with a 6-man rotation? Or do we have more of a conventional piggyback where we really kind of start guys off a little bit slower and don't expect them to throw 6 innings in their first outing? I think one thing Wes has done such a nice job of is when the schedule allows to push pitchers back and give them an extra day of rest, we take advantage of it for the whole staff. We may see skipping guys from time to time, but our goal, as you referenced, is to stay strong through the finish of the season, because we have aspirations to play well into October. If we're going to do that, we're going to need to get creative as to how we deploy our pitching throughout the course of the year. We think we have the personnel to do it, but I think time will tell if we're accurate on that front.
Moving ahead just a few days, March 8th, 2021, Justin Jefferson, Vikings wide receiver, was on the show. Just really enjoyed the whole conversation I had with him, but in particular this 3 or 4 minute segment that we did, just kind of talking about his goals for last year and just kind of his confidence really shone through, I thought, during this part. It's not often that a draft pick comes in and immediately, I know you weren't thinking about it necessarily as replacing Stephon Diggs, but there's a symmetry with the draft pick, with him leaving, you coming in. Did you feel an additional pressure because of that aspect of your arrival in Minnesota and his departure?
At all. I'm a competitor. I don't run from competition. I don't run from, the say-sos. I just focused on myself. I didn't really try to focus on being the next Stephon Diggs. I just wanted to be the better version of me, the best version of me. So going in, I just was confident in the game, just trying to get connected with Kirk. And each week our connection got better and better. And the stats says otherwise.
I think it's great. Nice, kind of shows your generosity that you are letting Justin Herbert keep your Rookie of the Year award at his house. But don't you think you should go pick it up and bring it to your place at some point?
He had a phenomenal season. Of course, I would love to have that award, to win that award. That's every rookie's main goal at the end of the season. But it is what it is. I got all pro, and I got a Pro Bowl selection that he didn't get. So I'm pretty fine with not getting it. It's all good. There's plenty of other awards that I'm going to be out there, competing for.
Receiver, is dependent on a quarterback always to get you the ball. How do you walk the line between letting a quarterback know you're open and then coming off as someone who's whining to get the ball all the time? How do you find that nice balance between, hey, I'm open, but don't say it too much?
Yeah, it's it's hard, especially in today's world. Where if you ask for the ball, you're a drama queen, you're all of these things. But if you're sit there being quiet, not saying anything, you're not going to get the ball anyway. So all of that is outside noise. We know what our communication is, inside the locker room. But nobody is going to understand us like we're going to understand each other. So all of the outside noise is irrelevant.
Now, and you can disagree or agree with this. I'd say you guys had a good offense last year, 2020. What needs to happen for you guys as a group, and even you individually, to take another step in 2021 to become great, or to have me describe you as great or elite, whatever word you want to call it, in 2021?
I do feel like we are a great offense. We have the potential to be one of the best offenses in the league. And just off of the stuff that we did last year, we were top 3 top 4, something like that, in offense. So we have the guys. We have the guys to do it. We have guys on the team that can make some plays and have the ability to make somebody miss in space. So we just need to find those missing pieces. We need to find that extra level to really put this team in that conversation of the Super Bowl. So a lot of guys are definitely counting us out and not having us in that conversation. So that should be our motivation going into next season.
Let's jump ahead a little bit. June 9th, Rod Carew, Twins legend, Baseball Hall of Famer. Really enjoyed talking to him about hitting and the modern game. Had some things to say about that, certainly. So here was Rod Carew. What a strange time in baseball. If I might ask you a little bit about just the game itself right now. You're seeing batting averages at kind of a 50-year low. The approaches to hitting a lot different than when you played the game. What are your big picture thoughts on baseball right now and how baseball is being played?
Well, I think it's different. They taught us to play the game the way we did by moving runners over into scoring positions and having guys steal a base and let the other guy drive them in. Now they're not giving up any outs to get runners into scoring position. Like if there's a runner on second base with nobody out, we were forced to either bunt him over or hit a ground ball to the opposite side of the field to get that run over into third base, because there's so many different ways you can score from third base, even with 2 outs. I don't really care for the shift.
Right.
I think the shift is overrated, and I'm disappointing in the players who don't take advantage by trying to make adjustments to go the other way.
They wouldn't have been able to shift very well against you, but how do you think you would have fared in the modern game, especially if they did try to shift you? Would you have been able to beat the shift, do you think?
Well, since I use the foul lines, from left field to right field, I used to hit the ball all over. So the shift wouldn't have worked with me. And I don't think they would have put the shift on anyway, because they thought that I knew where I wanted to guide the ball. But no, it wasn't that easy.
When you watch baseball today, who are some of the players that you like to watch?
Well, Mike Trout is one. Albert Pujols is another. Miguel Cabrera with the Detroit Tigers, he's another one. The Yankees have a couple of guys that I like. A couple of young Latin guys that play the game the way they were taught how to play the game. But it's such a difference because today they're trying to get kids that can't hit home runs to uppercut the ball and make a lot of outs in the sky. Right. They forgot that there are more base hits on the ground than hitting the ball in the air. And, I could have hit home runs if I wanted to, but that wasn't my job. My job was to, get on base, steal a base, let Killer Brewer or Oliva drive me in. And it was all about the team. It wasn't just about the player, and today it's all different. It's all about the players, and I'm not favorable about the way they're playing today.
In mid-July, we did a series of special edition shows. Actually took a week off, if you can believe it. Didn't do that very much in the last year, but pre-recorded a bunch of podcasts during the Baseball All-Star Week and got to talk to Kent Hrbek, Twins legend, 2 World Series, of course. It was the whole impetus for the series was looking back 30 years previous to a whole bunch of big events that were in the Twin Cities. Obviously, the 91 World Series, a big part of that. And I confessed to him that I was a big Atlanta Braves fan back then, and we got a good discussion going about the Ron Gant play at first base during that 1991 World Series. You brought up Ron Gant, and I was gonna I was going to go there because as I told you before we started recording, I was a big Braves fan, one of the bigger Braves fans around back in 91. I was almost 15, kind of at the height of my, baseball fandom at that point. I was living in North Dakota. That's where I grew up, but tons of Twins fan friends, but because of the Braves being on every day at that point, that was kind of the team I had adopted. And, I was living quite a ways from the Twin City, still like 5 hours away. So that was my team. And so that play is very, I see it a lot differently, obviously, than a lot of Minnesota sports fans do. What just in your assessment of that play, it happened so fast. It's just the moment you get the out. What if anything do you remember about it, and what have people told you about it over the years? I think there was a bobblehead of it over the years. It's been kind of it became this moment, obviously, in history.
It's definitely the most asked question I get about the 91 series, of course, being involved in the play. And, I even to this day don't try to connect to Atlanta when I go flying someplace, because I don't want to be seen in Atlanta, because I know I'm loved there. But, the play happened so quick. I caught the ball and went to put a tag on Gant, and everybody says I lifted his foot off the bag. But as you can see, if you watch the thing, and I've explained this to a million people, that my arm is on top of his leg. I wasn't lifting up. He was falling and teeter-tottering over my other leg, and, had gone back in. He slides back in. He's probably safe.
Right.
But he teeter-tottered over my leg, and I knew he was, the way his momentum was going, and the way he had leaned on my leg and was falling over, I'd just keep the tag on. I could feel him falling off my off the base, and I just kept the tag on him. And I talked to Drew Coble since then, and it's exactly how he saw it. And if you watch the play with an open mind, you see what happened. You watch it with a closed mind, you want to say I picked him up and threw him off the base, which did not happen. I know you don't understand that.
No. I get it.
I think that's the way the play went. And I think if you look at it and try to dissect it, the whole thing happened, so quickly. And then for the next 5 minutes, Tim McCarver talked nothing but Herbeck pulled him off the bag. Herbeck pulled him off the bag. So that was in everybody's mind right away, as it was in yours.
Absolutely. Right? But over the years, you see, there's countless moments like that in sports history. Some have gone Minnesota's way, some haven't. You can look at the Drew Pearson play from 75. And if you're a Cowboys fan, you're like, well, Nate Wright fell down. If you're a Vikings fan, you say, Drew Pearson pushed him. You know what I mean? So it just makes for one of those kind of classic moments and classic debates that will never probably go away. Have you ever talked to Ron Gant about that play?
I have not. I know that he still to this day says I pulled him off the bag. And I, to this day, still say he fell off the bag. So that's where we're at with that. I have done a couple radio shows in Atlanta with radio, and they don't even they don't even hold any punches down there. As soon as a radio show he starts, that's right what they start in with. So, and it was it was a big play in the game.
Absolutely.
Again, it wasn't. It didn't allow any runs. We could have, Jack could have struck the next guy out, or not Jack, but who the heck? Tapani was pitching. Got the next guy out, and maybe it's water under the bridge. Nobody thinks about it because that was the third out of the inning, and they had not scored any runs yet in that inning, and so who knows? But they think they could have built a big inning and scored some runs. But there's been plays like that, and then I've even heard the thing now with if they had replay back then, would the replay went and showed that I supposedly pulled him off the base. I think if you look at it and dissect it, you'll see what happens.
Let's move ahead to August 31st. Cheryl Reeve, head coach, general manager of the Minnesota Lynx. One of my favorite people to talk to in this whole market, always gives fantastic answers, great insights. Had some interesting things to say about Sylvia Fowles, the star player for the Lynx, who appears like she will be coming back for another season next year, and some of the disrespect she felt like Sylvia Fowles was getting in the league. One player in particular who had a brilliant game the other day. Sylvia Fowles, in the midst of a brilliant season, in the midst of a brilliant career. I think she had the first 2020 3-3 game, I guess is what we would call it in league history. Points, rebounds, steals, blocks. I believe she leads the Lynx in all 4 of those categories as well this year. Points, rebounds, steals, and blocks. Not assists. She's lacking a little bit. But after her game the other night, a big win for you over Seattle, you mentioned, that she maybe doesn't get the recognition she deserves. I think part of your post-game commentary, in fact, was when was the last time she got Player of the Week? And she still didn't get Player of the Week for that. Is this just reinforcement of what you are talking about?
Yeah, a little bit. They didn't help themselves in that regard. I think it's inexcusable and irresponsible. It's as you said, in 25 years of playing in the WNBA, no players ever had that stat line. So it's historic. I think that the players that they awarded Player of the Week to certainly had good games and good stat lines. But from my perspective, historic performances are the ones that, that's what the Player of the Week award is about. So, people that make those decisions, it's mind boggling sometimes the way that they come up with these things. And, but we certainly are, tired of the disrespect and, especially as it pertains to Syl, this is one of the greatest players of all time, and you would never know it in terms of how the league treats her. And this is a great example of that.
What is this a league trying to promote younger players? I mean, Sylvia's been around obviously for a long time. Players who keep doing excellent things tend to be forgotten a little bit, but maybe we can get away from I don't want to make you gripe about it anymore, but just what makes her so special, and how has she continued to do what she does, at this stage of her career?
Well, and it is good to focus on that because I could really unload on the reasons why I think.
You certainly can if you want to, Cheryl. That's good podcast
dark-skinned gay athlete maybe doesn't get, the push that maybe the lighter skin, or even white athletes that we tend to push in these situations. Syl's also not somebody that gets too engrossed in social media and promoting herself. That's so, from that standpoint, I don't know what's not to like, about consistently being great and buoying a franchise and, having a franchise in contention, again, after, so kind of, went through the dynasty years. And then, now, it's a completely different team that she's puts on her back every night and drags us back into contention. There's a lot to like there. I'm really, really proud of her. I know Syl doesn't, not somebody that needs shine, but it's not about that, whether somebody needs it or not. It's about who's deserving of it. And, I just think that, her play, why can she be so good? She takes care of her body. She really is committed to preparing herself for every season that she comes in and wants to be great, has become a tremendous leader. And ultimately, I think what we're seeing now, what shines through for me is her love for the game. Because, it's hard, the way that she plays, she'll be 36 next month. And, it's a hard physical game that sometimes it's hard to get up for, coming to practice. And, the way that she plays, every possession is physical. And she does hard things physically every night. And so puts on the line. And so to me, that just tells me how much she loves the game. And so I'm really proud of her, and I'm proud that she's a Minnesota Lynx.
September 30th, had the pleasure of talking with Carrie Tollefson, local runner. Got me thinking a lot about marathons. I don't know if you guys know this, but I've run 5 marathons in my life, still run for fun. Do not do 26 miles anymore. Might have another one in me at some point, maybe when I'm not quite as busy, when I don't have 3 little kids running around the house so much. But really enjoyed talking to Carrie just about the running process, why she likes running marathons, and what she hoped to get out of the Twin Cities Marathon, which was just a few days after we talked.
It's a little bit more doable to train for those half marathons. You're not out there nearly as long. You can get it done before work type thing. But I like doing a marathon once every 2 to 4 years. That seems to be my rate. And, I think for me, when I tackle the marathon, it's a mentality shift, having to devote myself to doing a long run one day every 7 to 10 days for 12, 16 weeks. I like that. I like feeling accomplished when I walk in the door and say, I was out there for 20 miles today. That's something hard and I did it. So I think I'll always have 26.2 kind of lingering, but I take my time in between them.
Yeah, I feel, I don't feel like anybody who's ever done a marathon has ever definitively said they've done their last one. So you never know, right? Carrie Tollefson, enjoying this conversation. Last thing for you, just for even, the fastest runners, the beginning runners who are doing their first marathon, what's your race day advice or kind of thing that you try to keep in mind as you're running these races?
I think just keep in mind that we're all there in it together. It really is a special moment. And, you might meet somebody, like I said, and have a lifelong friendship, or you're just going to remember that conversation that you might have had with somebody along the way. But I will always cherish my marathons. I don't do that many, like I said, but enjoy it. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the ups and downs. For me, my whole career, I learned so much about perseverance. And, as a runner, it's always hard. Even our easy days are still challenging. And, when you look at that and you come back in the door and you realize, and you look at yourself in the mirror, you realize that you've still done something hard for the day, whether it was a 20-minute run or a 20-mile run, it's still an accomplishment. And, I really believe in the run. I believe in what it does for you as a person. I believe it makes you confident and powerful and compassionate. And, you're surrounding yourself with these positive, like-minded, goal-driven people. And so I can't say enough about it. You don't have to be fast. You can walk more than you run. I don't care. I'm just happy to be a part of this community.
Just a few more here. Adrian Heath, head coach of Minnesota United, was on November 17th. Probably delivered one of my favorite lines of the whole podcast when he said, "Hindsight United is undefeated." I will let him explain the context of that. When you do start like that 0-4, and the resilience is certainly important, but it almost feels like every game gets magnified when you have that start. There a certain amount of is there a toll that gets taken when you have to play with a certain amount of urgency for the last 30 games of a 34 game season or whatever it might be?
Well, I certainly I realized very early that we hadn't really given ourselves a lot of room for error. We were going to have to have a really good sort of last 30 odd games to make sure that we were going to give ourselves a chance. I honestly think, though, Michael, if we'd had our better players fit for longer and been able to put them on the field, I don't think we'd have gone through the trauma that we did a couple of weeks ago with that last game against the Galaxy. And I know I'm not the only coach who says it, but ultimately we can help the situation, but you're only as good as your players that you're putting out regularly on the field. And when we've had our better players on the field, we look as though we can win games of football. But, the way the world we live in now with social media, you've spoke about this before. I don't do any social media because I know what it's like, and I don't want to be listening and reading what people think about me who don't even know me and have never met me and are suddenly an expert on my particular industry, because it's one of the few industries that everybody seems to know my job better than me. And yet I have enough respect for everybody else's position not to think I know more than them. But that's the way we live in.
I think you should join Twitter, Adrian, and then before every game, put out a Twitter poll asking what formation you should use and what your starting 11 should be.
Yeah, well, everybody, hindsight United's never lost. And everybody I speak to says, in hindsight, I go, yeah, but I haven't got hindsight. I have to pick the team 2 or 3 days before and work on the team shape. And, people have always got a really good opinion of what we should have done after the event. Unfortunately for me, I don't get that opportunity.
Did you say Hindsight United? I've never heard that before. I love that. That's great.
Hindsight United, never been beat.
November 24th, Boy Mafe from the Gophers football team enjoyed a really good season for them. And I thought he'd give an interesting answer about controlling what you can control. And I've kind of come back to this as I've thought about different things in sports and even different things in my life since talking to him just a few months ago. I heard you in the group setting, and I think Tanner Morgan said the same thing. You guys are very focused on Saturday, not really worried about what happens in the Iowa-Nebraska game on Friday, even though I'm sure at some point you'll know what happens. You'll know what's at stake in Saturday's game. How does PJ Fleck keep you guys so focused on just the kind of the one-game championship mentality?
I mean, the biggest thing I've realized is that, throughout the years of being here, when you do focus on the external, you look outside of what you need to focus on, it brings a lot of stress and a lot of pressure onto yourself that you can't control. So the biggest thing we talk about is the controllables and the uncontrollables. And the things that you can't control, you don't really focus on those because regardless of you focus and worrying and thinking about those all the time, you can't change anything about it. But the fact is the things you can control, the things you can worry about, like our game on Saturday, those are the things that you can control and take precautions and go through your process of preparing for those type of games. Those are things that you focus on. But the things you can't control, like what happens on Friday, those things you can't really waste your time or necessarily focus and put all your energy into those type of things.
But those are the sorts of things we love to write and talk about in the media, man. You're killing us.
I hear you. I definitely hear you. And it's something that I think that helps us out as a team to make sure we're on the right track. Because I feel as if, you have your players distracted and focusing on other things that defeats the purpose and that steals away from your end goal as a team and the things that you want to focus on.
And finally, December 2nd, Ryan Hartman of the Wild, leading scorer for them at the time, leading goal scorer, at least having a fantastic season for the Minnesota Wild right now. Just some really interesting stuff about his journey to the NHL, getting his start, what it meant to him, and just really enjoyed that conversation I had with Ryan Hartman. Things intensified, obviously, at a certain point. You excel in junior hockey, you get drafted by Chicago, which is your, essentially, where you grew up. I believe you grew up a Blackhawks fan to a certain extent. What's it like? I mean, it's got to be a dream to a certain extent to get drafted and play for the team you rooted for growing up, but I imagine there's also a certain amount of pressure that comes with that as well.
Yeah, I was a huge Blackhawks fan. I got to watch a lot of good players going through and grew up going to a lot of games. Got to watch Kane and Taves early in their career when they first got in the league and they were dominating. Obviously, they still are. But, I remember I had my final, my last final in my freshman year of high school, 2010. It was my Spanish final. And I didn't even look at a question. I just filled it out, and just so I can get downtown to the parade. Me and my buddy picked me up from school, and we drove down to Chicago. And was part of the sea of Blackhawk jerseys downtown on Wacker Drive. And then fast forward 3 years, I got drafted by them, and then fast forward another 2 years, I was on one of the buses for the parade. So it was just kind of a crazy five-year period. If I were to see myself 5 years before that, sitting down and cheering for these guys, and then being with them 5 years later.
I won't ask you the next question in Spanish. So it sounds like you didn't necessarily.
I would know a word.
Okay, I'm just kidding. Anyway, a couple more things for you, Ryan Hartman. Enjoying this conversation. I feel like players get to the NHL, and everybody, pretty much anybody who's gotten this far scored a certain amount of goals. They were probably one of the best players on their team growing up, whether, whatever level it was. Then you get to the NHL and you kind of get this label or role put on you. It's not like you magically forget how to score goals, even if suddenly you get deemed a checking player or more of a defensive style player. How do you relate to that kind of idea? And maybe should we not be so surprised that someone who, scored at a pretty good clip in junior hockey and has had a fair share of NHL goals, has 12 goals and leads this team right now?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, everyone at the NHL level was, really good growing up, and that's the reason they're in the NHL. And sometimes they fall into roles that aren't necessarily goal scoring roles, and they don't really have the opportunity sometimes to score, but it's obviously there in every guy that's in the NHL. Obviously, maybe with defensemen, it might be a little different, like a stay-at-home defenseman who prides in blocking shots and has probably been doing that his whole career, might not necessarily ever been a scorer. But I was thinking about it the other day too. It was like, the longest I've ever been in a certain league was probably 2 years. I played 2 years in the USHL with the US program, 2 years in the OHL, 2 years in the AHL. In those 2 years, you finally start getting comfortable, and then after those 2 years, you start moving up to the next level, and then you got to kind of reset and not necessarily learn the game, but the speed changes. And now this is my I remember 5th or 6th year now. It's the longest I've ever been in the league, and I have that comfortability of the game slowing down, and I've been here for a while now, and I'm coming up on 400 games, and the game just feels comfortable. And not that I haven't been adjusted for a while now, but it is the longest you've been in the same league your whole life. So definitely feel just really comfortable on the ice, and aware of a lot of situations that I might not have been early in my career.
Listen, I could have picked 50, 100 more, honestly. I could have picked any number of segments with our beat writers that I've had on, although a lot of those were more in the moment and less about preserving any kind of history. So, but some memorable moments, some memorable guests we've had on in this last year. More to come, of course, as the year goes on. We're in the middle of a Vikings coaching search, which will be the subject of today's main daily delivery with Ben Gessling. But again, really love doing this podcast. Love having you guys listen to this every day, sometimes twice a day. You never know. But thank you so much. And here's to another year of daily delivery.